mentioned these alliances, CCP really hates NATO.
Right.
Like that is since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, anti-NATO propaganda coming out of like the CCP has been really intense.
Well, it's because they can't handle us. They can't conceive of a world where they are part of an alliance structure that includes more than one country, because they perceive themselves as the king of kings in terms of the countries, and they have one alliance with North Korea. They don't operate in the sense of working things out together. Even when they have military exercises with the Russians, they're just in the same place at the same time. Their amount of interaction between the two forces is very minimal.
Really?
Yes.
Well, there's essentially two levels of joint operations, right? Like the first level is to just learn how to not get in each other's way. And a much more difficult level, as I understand, is to actually learn how to work together.
Right.
And coordinate. And that's very, very few countries have that, right?
Right. And so NATO is the best example. And by the way, there's such a thing called the NATO standard in everything, in weapons, in communications, in equipment, in everything. And Taiwan is considered a major non-NATO ally according to U.S. law. And so all their equipment is NATO compatible. So if and when Taiwan were to be attacked and the U.S. or other countries, Japan is also considered a major non-NATO ally. So these countries that have NATO standard equipment will be able to work together in what we call combined is between countries and joint is between services in a country. So in a combined environment, they could operate, but they have to train. And so I'm hoping that as part of the different NDAs that are being passed each year, that training is getting more and more in depth and stronger, so that when in the future something happens, the Taiwanese military and the Japanese and the U.S. and whoever else wants to play, including those NATO countries like the UK and France, who also happen to have nuclear weapons, want to play, it won't be difficult because there's a standard that we all play to. China doesn't have that with Russia. They don't have like a communist standard,
And that's interesting because that shows another weakness and vulnerability of the ideology, where you can't share power. You can't collaborate as equals.
Even though they have all these cooperative partnerships.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
What they don't have in any of those partnerships is trust.
Basically, yeah. And I think especially currently with the situation Russia finds itself in, I'm sure China believes itself to be the dominant power between those two, that Russia is incredibly dependent on China, and so China gets to call the shots.
Well, as time goes on with the war in Ukraine, Russia needs more and more supplies from China, from North Korea, from all the gang to keep its war going, because even though they have the ability to produce their own weapons, they don't have the ability to replenish them as fast as they use them. And so consequently, my theory is if Russia loses the war in Ukraine, China wins. If Russia wins the war in Ukraine, China wins. Because
win-win cooperation.
Yeah. Did you make up that quote?
I heard it from a friend.
From China?
Yeah. Well, I'll point out an interesting thing about, when you talk about NATO and these alliances is the Russians had been saying for a long time that, NATO had better not let Ukraine in NATO. And then NATO was like, yeah, well, if we don't let Ukraine in, then maybe Russia won't invade Ukraine. Because, right, it was kind of like, if I appease Russia about their anger about our alliance, then it'll work out for us. And what that showed is that at best, the alliance, that strategy of appeasement failed.
Correct.
But it also means that, like, when an authoritarian country gets mad about your alliances, that doesn't mean you should appease them by not doing the alliance, because that may not make any positive difference. And it may make a negative difference, although, you don't know in this case.
But in both cases, the Russians believe that Ukraine was part of Russia. Always
since ancient times.
They believe that. And just in the same way, the Communist Party, even though it's false, believes that Taiwan is part of China. So they both believe in this expansionist ideology where all the territories they've ever had in the history of mankind should be a part of them. It's like saying the Romans, like Italy, should have all the countries in the Mediterranean because at one point they're all part of Rome, or the Turkish Empire, which controlled all the countries in the Mediterranean, should be part of Turkey. So the deal is that if the NATO alliance is able to push back, then it stops the Russians. So because in 2014, NATO and the U.S. did nothing regarding the invasion of Crimea and the eastern provinces of Ukraine, Putin thought he could get away with more and more and more. And so, like you said, when NATO pushed back, it not only surprised Putin, but it also created a problem for Xi Jinping. And also, with these alliances that we're talking about, it's going to cause more and more headache for them. And the more headaches that Xi Jinping has, the better I feel.
I think that, like, if you go according to that logic, really, we're all Mongolian, right?
Oh,
Like, it should be the Great Khanate, who's because they actually were even in Russia.
They didn't
right?
get Europe though.
Russia.
They got Russia, yeah.
But I mean, yeah, if you gave them another 10 years, I bet they would have made it.
What wasn't the Qing dynasty non-Chinese?
They were Manchurian. Yeah. And in fact, interestingly, the only two before the Communist Party, the only two really expansionist territorial governments were the foreigners, the Mongolians in the Yuan dynasty, and the foreigners, the Manchus, who came and took China in the Qing dynasty.
This is not true.
And now you have the Western ideology of communism coming and being expansionist.
This is not true.
Okay.
Are you signing your contract? Did you sign your contract?
No. I'm just this is an actual the idea that China was not aggressive or took over its neighbors.
No, sorry. What? Okay, you're right. Let me rephrase this. The largest
expansion.
The largest expansions were under these foreign imposed governments. Largest in terms of land area.
According,
okay.
Well, I think you're right in terms of that, but according to Chinese history, those people became Chinese. Do you know?
You mean
what I mean?
They were Sinicized.
They were Sinicized.
The Manchus lost their culture and adopted Chinese culture.
Nobody speaks Manchurian anymore.
Yeah.
The written language is dead. They became Chinese.
But the Mongolians didn't lose their language.
No, I mean, they only ruled China for 76 years or 72 years, something like that. So
didn't last too long.
It wasn't as long. Qing dynasty was 300 years.
What I'm getting is we need to restore the glory of the Roman Empire. That's what you were saying, right?
Why not?
Well, I guess Asia would be Mongolian and Russia would be, and then Europe could be Roman. Is that what you're saying?
Would the U.S. be Iroquois nation? Or do we get to keep our American Empire?
I think essentially America belongs to...
Well, maybe you take get the Aztecs and Incas and Mayans get to keep respective portions of the Americas.
Where are the Vikings in all this?
Newfoundland?
They can get, Iceland.
They can take Canada?
Yeah, sure. Let the Vikings take Canada. Let anyone take Canada.
Now, you don't want to make your Canadian viewers upset.
They're used to it. They're pushovers.
Yeah, it's okay. They'll apologize to us. Thank you for watching.
There was a real question I had at some point. Oh yeah, we were talking about since the Russia thing came up. So obviously, with some of these alliances, we see that there is pushback to China. But I also see that, after the UK said that China is providing deadly force to Russia, the US was like, whoa, we don't know about that because we don't want to be, actually have to cross those red lines that we put out with China and actually sanction them and treat them.
Right.
So there still seems like there's this wishy-washiness.
Yeah, but the wishy-washiness went away when Zelensky at the Shangri-La conference said point blank, China is providing weapons or weapons parts to Russia. Xi Jinping lied to me when he said he wasn't going to do that. I think that veneer went away.
Xi Jinping lied to somebody?
Wait a minute. Am I not going to get my panda?
I think you're not even going to get a panda, toy.
Oh.
I think you're going to get like a fine. Your social
credits
your
gonna
social
go down.
score just went down.
That contract I signed for a lovey-dovey friendship hug.
You just didn't see the small print where it said that you have to do all these things first before you get the panda.
You have to, first of all, deny Taiwan independence. And yeah, I mean, was it the snuggle cooperation that you signed because you get a panda in exchange?
Yeah.
Snuggle? Yeah.
The Snuggle Bear.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to call him.
So Chris signed the snuggle cooperative agreement for all time
for at least a new era.
All round, all weather, new era.
For the new error.
The new error, yes. All right. So looking forward, these alliances are forming. What other alliances could form, assuming that the countries of the world stay on track to actually view the Chinese Communist Party as a threat?
Like I said, a lot of the countries in the Indo-Pacific are already signing new agreements. So we're waiting to hear about the Japanese-French agreement. They already have one. The Japanese already have one with the UK and Australia. So there's several agreements we're waiting for completion. Japan and the Philippines are also getting ready to sign an agreement. So there's lots of these bilaterals coming up. In addition to that, there are some multilaterals that could add more countries. Like we mentioned AUKUS, and that Japan might be added to Pillar 2. And we might have an expanded alliance. So you have these three: South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. You have Japan, Philippines, and U.S. So what about combining those two together?
Like a Triforce.
So then you'd have 4 countries, right? You'd have South Korea, Japan, Philippines, and the U.S. That would be the best for Taiwan, because then all the countries surrounding Taiwan and have an interest in Taiwan are unified, and it would just be a matter of adding Taiwan to it. So, and then you also have Australia, which is now trying to get its power or its influence expanded. So they're doing a lot of things with the Philippines. Okay, so then now you start adding the countries that already have these bilateral relationships to the bigger multilateral, to the point where you basically have an Asian NATO.
Oh, that would make China so mad.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And hopefully it would deter China. Because if everyone in the region that has a significant military is prepared to fight China, then it makes it more complicated, and again gives Xi Jinping a bigger headache. And you know what that makes me feel? Good.